We all know the book fair deals with occasionally rare books, rare topics, and rare writing talents. I would call the occasion today, or qualifying such three, right? And it is my great honor to share a platform here with Sharlene Teo, because we both come from the same university. Sharlene went to Warwick, so did I. She did a degree in law there, but ended up as an outstanding young writer in the UK. And with a bit of a sense of guilt, I did a degree in English literature there and ended up with something slightly more than nothing in Hong Kong. So we went different paths and different way. However, Britain has changed so much in the past 20 years, and it is amazing to see some young Asian writer like Miss Teo, who has gone on a very different path, going to the University of East Anglia, a respectable academic institution, because there is a writer's workshop there, first opened by the renowned British novelist Malcolm Bradley, and then it is one of the very few well-known and reputed writing workshops in the UK. I think the latest Nobel Literature winner, Ishiguro, also went there. And but it is rather amazing to see why Sharlene, having gone through the writing workshop at East Anglia, would end up, or not end up, but flown up to a level of a mini Asian Stephen King of Britain. Well, I believe, or I hope, this is only one of the many stages of her brilliant metamorphosis. You're still very young, right? Born in 1987, right? I still remember what I was doing, working as a broadcaster somewhere in London, when you were born in Singapore. Now, I have been fascinated by, and I've been looking forward to this talk, because it is such a kaleidoscopic combination of so many fascinating elements. The origin of the ghost culture in the Malayan peninsula, wherein the writer was born in Singapore and now living in the UK, right? I have been to Malaya, well, if I can allow to call it, use that cultural term rather than the political one called Malaysia. It is all covered geographically by plateau, highlands, forests, and jungles, right? Just like in Thailand and on most islands in Indonesia. I strongly believe that the existence of ghosts and monsters, right, have got something to do with the with a geographical magnetic field and a bit of a climate there. When you get into a jungle surrounded by cliffs, and you lift your and you look up and you don't see the most tiny patch of blue sky, and you feel there is a presence there. And that's why perhaps a country like Thailand is now teeming with so many fascinating ghost stories, or even ghost movies, right? I believe that Malaya is a country with such geographical characteristics. Whereas Britain, yes, I have had some spooky experiences of ghost encounter, which I wouldn't like to go through, because I think this book itself is the hero tonight, and it's the hero today. So, what is the focus? So, I think the elements of Malayan myths and ghosts and life experiences and the writing career in Britain all together form the best recipe for the birth or the growth of an outstanding Asian ghost writer or experts in the world of English language. Now, is all yours.
Thank you, Chip.
How have you come to the idea of writing such a book, right? Or adopting such a career?
That's precisely what I'm going to talk about. So thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for being here. So over the next, the time left of the session, what I'm going to do is basically tell you a little bit about my influences and how I came to kind of write Ponti. It will be basically more of a conversation, so I'd like to kind of engage with you, and at any point of time, I have a very Singaporean habit. When I get very excited, I tend to speak really quickly. So if I'm talking too fast and you don't understand what I'm saying, you can just give me like a funny face, just be like, make a funny face at me, or just do this, and then I'll slow down.
We live in the world of emojis anyway.
Exactly, yeah. I think, yeah. So basically, what I'm going to do is just talk a bit about what inspired the film, the book, the films that inspired the book, and I'll be doing 3 very, very short readings. So basically, the book is told through 3 points of view. So yeah, I will do a short reading from each narrative strand. Okay? And then we'll have some questions at the end. So yeah, that's me, Sharlene Teo. So that's me. I was born in Singapore and I've lived in the UK. And that's the book, Ponti. This is the covers, because everybody likes covers, and I think they look really different. So the left one is the UK edition, the right one is the American edition. I don't suppose anyone knows any context about what it's about, right? Any idea? I mean, can you get a clue from, no? Well, you're about to find out. Basically, I'm very interested in this thing called ekphrasis, which is basically a literary description of a visual work of art. And that's always something that's fascinated me, because if you see a textual description, for example, the most famous example being the picture of Dorian Gray, your kind of imagination fills in the image of what you perceive it would look like. So like it's very interesting sort of cognitive imaging that you have to make. So I was very, very drawn to the idea of a fictional trilogy of movies called Ponti, which are based upon actual films that were made in Singapore between the late 50s to the early 70s. And basically, Ponti is the story of a woman called Amisa Tan, who acts as a Pontianak. So that's a Southeast Asian mythical cannibalistic entity. She basically goes around and eats men, and she's acting as this monster. These films get made in the late 70s at a time in the Singaporean film industry when they were losing popularity, so nobody actually really was interested in them anymore. So it's about her, and it's also about her teenage daughter Sue, who's 16 in the year 2003, and has a very, very difficult relationship with her mother. And the final strand of the novel is told from the point of view of Cersei, who is Sue's only friend at school, and they have a falling out, and she looks back as an adult on her relationship with the mother and daughter, full of guilt, nostalgia, and shame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a short section from the beginning of the book, quite near the beginning. This is narrated by Sue. Hold on. So this takes place in 2003. So this is Amisa, the Ponti actress's daughter. Last Friday for National Education, I did a PowerPoint presentation on my mother's film career. My voice shook the whole way through my introduction. The girls in the back row sniggered. Ponti, not to be confused with Pontianak 1957, The Pontianak, Curse of Pontianak, or Return of the Pontianak, was the best and most underappreciated film to come out of Singapore in 1978. Ponti is a cult movie. It is the first and undeniably finest of a trilogy, even though hardly anyone knows about them and it's difficult to obtain copies. But film fanatics find a way. My mother has received 4 letters from America, 3 from Indonesia, 2 from Japan, 1 from Holland, from these superfans telling her how much they love her. Once in a while, she takes the letters out from their manila folder, smoothing the creases, and rereads them silently. I told her if we got a computer, she might get even more fan mail, but she doesn't trust the internet, and neither does my aunt. My aunt says that too many wires will piss off the local spirits, and when I tell her it doesn't work like that, she gives me a small smile and waves me quiet. In the best and only role of her working life, my mother, in cheap prosthetics, plays a hunchbacked, congenitally deformed girl named Ponti, who makes a deal with a bomo to become beautiful. She will do anything, pay any price. A lifetime of ugliness is unbearable. My mother was 19 when she filmed it, close to my age. Please, Datuk, I beg you, she says to the camera, and the voice that comes out is a total stranger's, an American dub, sweet and small and foreign. The witch doctor grants her wish. Emerging from a dust cloud, she looks as radiant as a pearl, even in the grainy footage. With Ponti's beauty, however, comes a thirst for male blood. She is the Pontianak now, a cannibalistic monster. She must find and feed on victims in order to maintain her looks. She wears an off-white dress that hugs her hips and seduces men who are traveling alone under the lampless dirt roads of Pantai Dalam. It's all in keeping with the Pontianak myth, told by worried wives to make their husbands wary of young, beautiful girls walking alone at night. Of course, the men don't listen, and she looks so alluring. She brings her victims right up close and gives them a long, wet kiss that sucks the soul and youth out of them. The sight of my mother kissing an actor makes me squirm in my seat. Blood splatters, and then the camera pans to the top of palm trees. You can see the leaves shaking, the sound of hungry slurping off screen. They didn't have the budget for more gore, so we are spared the actual defilement. In the next shot, she's standing alone in the artificially lit glade. This is the clip I showed in class, rather than the seduction and murder before. It's a wordless scene, and my favorite. My mother is breathing heavily and looks clammy and defeated. Her shoulders are uncharacteristically slouched. The front of her dress is drenched in diluted corn syrup, more pink than red. She peers up slowly, and when she's facing the camera straight on, she blinks like she's coming out of a trance. And then her expression crumples. She's too tired even to cry. I always want to hug her here. All right, I'll stop there. So that's just from the first chapter. And that was Sue's voice. So yeah, what is Ponti and who is Ponti? Basically, as described in the novel, the female vampiric ghost in Malay mythology, popularly known as a woman who died in childbirth. There's also a city in Indonesia called Pontianak that was supposedly a ghost nest, so there were like lots and lots of like these creatures that the kind of army had to go in and defeat, supposedly. And it's also a British military expression for person of no tactical importance. So that's kind of like a non-player character, or like someone that is not in combat when they're fighting. So I really like that. And I only found out that Ponti stood for a person of no tactical importance when I was about 3/4 of the way through the book, and I really liked it, so I snuck it in. So basically, I actually just this morning I read this thing about PowerPoint presentations, and like there was this guy called like Cliff or whatever, and he was saying you should only have like 10 words per slide and only 10 slides at most. I have 38 slides, and they're quite a lot of words. So I feel like I've committed an error here because like I basically just be reading off the slide. Anyway, so this is like the definitions, and obviously it's come out of sort of Malay culture, which is quite animistic. So basically believing in kind of embodiments of spirits, and even things like roadsides, trees, hills, everything having a kind of spiritual element, a kind of undertone or undertow really to reality as we know it. And I think that what really, really fascinated me about the Pontianak myth is that this creature basically is capable of invading your domestic space. So to me, there is nothing scarier than something unknown kind of entering into your home. And that kind of element of uncanniness and home invasion really fascinated me. So there's a kind of literary theorist called Barbara Creed, and she talks about the monstrous feminine, which is different from, say, you talk about a female monster, because that is always in opposition to a male monster. So the monstrous feminine basically talks about sort of elements of horror and the abject and the uncanny linked to a woman's reproductive body. So Barbara Creed basically does analysis of various films, and she talks about how there are 7 faces of the monstrous feminine, basically like these roles that serve to sort of destabilize and challenge the dominant patriarchal view of the woman as a victim. So for example, if you look at films like Alien, or the Alien sort of sequels, there is quite a kind of strong imagery to do with like wombs and like breeding, if you know what I mean, like infestation. Similarly with Carrie and Psycho, it's very, very Freudian, so it's tied to ideas of the mother and like, you know, the horrific, the archaic mother or the monstrous womb or monstrous mothers. So that was something that I was very interested in. And also, I feel that with the Pontianak myth, if you look at, this is a Pontianak. I mean, it's supposed to be Pontianak. I mean, does she scare you? I mean, she's pretty scary. I mean, can you imagine if it was just you and her on a road? How would you feel, right? I think you would walk quickly, but you wouldn't want to run, because if you run, then she'd fly at you, right? So you got to walk quickly and look casual. Look at your phone, maybe. So basically, I've always found the Pontianak myth, ever since I was a child, and I learned about it, I thought it was very, very subversive and very radical. Because what you're saying is there's this kind of conventionally, in the past, hot woman, and rather than being a victim, you should be so scared of her. And I really, really love that. I thought there was a radical subversion of threat and victimhood in the sense that these men were being told to be terrified of these young women with like long dark hair who were like, hey, you know, come help me get off this, like climb off this banana tree. And they're like, oh, sure, but you know, you're told not to do that because you might get your eyeballs sucked out, according to the myths. So I really love that. I was kind of like, yeah, you go, Pontianak. You know, like long black hair, you know, it's all these kinds of tropes of femininity. She wears this white dress that is long and white, and it's kind of sexy, but it's also not, you know, it's kind of like mysterious. And she's got like long black hair that covers her face, but then when you get a glimpse of her face, she's like really beautiful. So I really like that. You're kind of like, and she's a trendsetter because the Pontianak myth is very, very old, but does she look familiar to you? Right? I mean, that was 1997. And it's funny how like the ring has taken over the aesthetic now of the Asian female with the long black hair, right? But the Pontianak did it first. I'm just pointing that out. So it's good to know she's a trendsetter. And I also really like that she like lives, according to the mythology, she lives in banana trees. You're like, why? But why not? You know, she's very much an individual. So I like that. Doesn't cave into pressure and trends, you know. She's always wearing that long white dress, so you gotta admire that. So basically, the other thing that really fascinated me, so you take this creature that I've been quite obsessed with for all those reasons that I explained, and then you take the other element, which is basically to do with how in Singaporean cinematic history, there is a kind of lacuna from the 1970s. There's a gap between the 70s and the 90s when they started making films again, because there was no popular demand for films, because there was no budget, because there was not enough like sort of talent amassed available. But before that, there was this thing known as the golden age of Singaporean cinema, and that's from the 1940s to the early 70s, when basically they were making loads and loads of films, including the original Pontianak trilogy. That kind of really played into the popular demand for these superstitions to be depicted on screen. So we had some really famous directors, like P. Ramlee, he was an actor turned director. He made, and B.N. Rao, who made the Pontianak film from 1957. That was so popular, it was dubbed into Cantonese and English. You know, they just produced a lot of films on this studio lot in Jalan Ampas, which is now abandoned. And basically, you could see the decline of Singaporean cinema and cinematic production from the 60s, because that's when the Hollywood imports start coming in. So everyone's like, oh, you know, I want to watch James Bond, or like, and then you go into the 70s, you have Jaws and Star Wars and stuff like that. So 1963 was the introduction of color television in Singapore. And by 1974, when they showed the World Cup finals, I don't know if any of you, were you following the World Cup? No? Yeah. Who were you rooting for? France? Oh no, just root for the winners. They won. You've got to root for the underdogs. I always root for the Asian countries. It's like, so basically, 1974, the World Cup finals, West Germany versus Netherlands. Within 3 days, there were 1,000 colored TVs that were sold in Singapore. So naturally, if you have TV sets at home, people are less likely to go to the cinema for like local productions. So therefore, the golden age ended. But during that time, in the original Pontianak trilogy from 1957, there was this woman called Maria Menado. She's lovely, isn't she? She basically acted as the original Pontianak. So I have a clip here. How do you play? I have a clip here of her, if you'd like to see her. I have to minimize it. Oh, no, not that one. That one, yeah.
Sekarang kita boleh tidur dengan aman. Ya, kita semua tidak perlu bersusah payah lagi. Saya percaya Pontianak tidak akan melanggar kemauan anaknya sendiri. Saya pun begitu juga, Dato'. Harap pun itu juga. Sekarang kamu semua boleh pulang. Mari kita pulang semua sekali. Selamat tinggal.
Ayah. Ayah. Kesianilah Jamil, ayah. Jamil balik semula. Ayah. Tolong Jamil, ayah.
Kau sudah terlambat. Kalau kau turut nasihat aku dahulu, kau akan hidup di dalam aman.
Iya, ayah. Jamil ingin menjadi cantik, tapi Jamil tak berjaya. Jamil bertobat, ayah.
Darah Pontianak mengalir di tubuh engkau, Tomil. Engkau tak dapat bertobat lagi.
Ayah.
I think I got it. Yeah. So that was the third in the trilogy. So you can see Maria Menado under so much makeup that she couldn't move her face, basically, and that's what she looks like. Just really kind of inscrutable and beautiful. That's applying the prosthetics on her, and she looks pretty silly. Ooh. See that? Yeah. Anyway, that's the original Pontianak. And another thing that really influenced me was the kind of, there was kind of a lo-fi aesthetic to what you just saw. And basically, around the 60s, there's this genre of films called giallo films, which basically is Italian for yellow, basically like crime pulp novels. There were a lot of films that came out around that era that kind of combined a form of sexploitation where there were these like kind of hapless female victims that meet all kinds of violent ends. And it was a predecessor to the slasher flicks that we know now, which are like really grisly and violent and, basically hate women. but I found that there was something very, very compelling about the Jello aesthetic. I don't think we have time to run through this, but there's a very David Lynchy film that came out a couple of years ago called Barbarian Sound Studio, which is about a sound engineer who basically makes the sound effects for these films. And you can see him stabbing a cabbage, because basically if you stab a cabbage really quickly, it sounds like you're stabbing a stomach. And there are all kinds of other neat tricks that you learn in that film. So I thought of like what it would be like to make a Singaporean horror trilogy and all these kinds of effects, background things that would take place, behind the scenes. And how about if you spent 3 weeks on set making a film like that, stabbing cabbages and applying all this really ugly prosthetics on your face, and then when it comes out, like nobody watches it. I mean, how would you feel? Like pretty terrible, right? So that's basically the genesis of Amisa Tan, the character, because she has all these big sort of dreams of being famous, the first sort of Singaporean actress to make it into Hollywood and all that. And obviously when the film comes out, only about sort of 20 people watch it. She's bound to be very angry. So this is some clips from Dario Argento's, he's one of the most famous sort of giallo directors. This is the Three Mothers trilogy. Three Mothers also relates to kind of three witches, so like a coven, going back to the monstrous feminine and the kind of radical subversion of, the kind of woman as victim trope. So basically, you get to the 70s, and people are really interested now in outer space and Star Wars and stuff like that. They don't really care about monsters. But there's this director in Singapore called Roger Sutton who makes a film called Pontianak 1975. And if you contrast it to the 1958 film that I just showed you, obviously that was very, very much influenced by, what was going on in Hollywood at the time. It was in black and white, and it was a kind of aesthetic to it. The Pontianak 1975 film is a completely different aesthetic. So I'll show you a clip from that, if you like. You want that? You want to watch that? Okay, great. Let me just try and control this mouse here. Have you seen any of these films? Did you? No, they're really obscure.
It's a shame that Hong Kong and Singapore are so close geographically to each other, but miles apart.
Yeah.
As far as such a pop
Hong
culture
Kong has
is
so many more films that come out regularly.
We used to be influenced by something like the Hammer Studio, from Britain, making the kind of third-rate horror movies.
Right, like
It
Jello,
seems that we all share the same origin. The Hong Kong movies at that time, we did produce something similar to that, but short of forming a school into a school, right?
Yeah. All right. So this is, I don't know how long this is. It's pretty terrible. So it's so bad that I don't even think I can personally watch like the whole thing. I'll just. It's really bad. Here. Oh no! Now I've confused. Okay, we'll start from the beginning. Sorry. No, 7 minutes in. Oh no! Sorry. Oh, this is actually the whole film. No, sorry. Okay, so, nightclub. Sexy lady.
You're doing
I've been singing this song forever. Recorded a cat, right? It's obviously a cat. It's a cat. It's dead. He's dead. Okay, we'll end there. Sorry. Yeah, so as you can see, like, I don't know about you, but I felt like the earlier film, like the effects were bad, but there was something about it that kind of made it more successful. You know, maybe it was whether it was black and white or there was a bit more, like, I don't know, subtlety to it, whereas this one is just terrible. I mean, I think everything takes really long. The acting is terrible. The editing or whatever is bad. So, and they gave her this, they thought that they would give her this really long, terrible wig, which I think doesn't work. You know, you can't take out an essential element of her iconic look. You know what I mean? I told you it's like long black hair, so it doesn't work. So yeah, basically the Ponti films in the book are more in line with this. So they're kind of meant to be so terrible that you can't even watch them. So like the kind of final element of the book, like what inspired the book, was basically the idea of Singapore itself, the city, changing at the same rate that this Amisa character and the film industry develops. So looking at the trajectory of the city from say the 50s, like post-independence, through to the early 2000s. So you can see places like this. So these are various places in Singapore. That's Bugis Junction. It's like a shopping mall. That's Tanjung Pagar. Basically, like, I'm very fascinated with commercialized nostalgia. So, like, I think in a city like Singapore, there's a lot of juxtaposition between the old and the hyper new. But they've started to conflate this, I think, for like commercial purposes. So making things look old on purpose, that basically calls back to like an earlier era. So this is meant to look like an old sweet stand, like from the 60s, but it's part of this really swanky bar called Loof, which is, so you know what I mean? There's something a little bit kind of hollow, and there's a kind of disjunction to that. And you see like this kind of, managed nostalgia. Like this reminds you of like a time in the 50s, which maybe didn't even exist. And I thought, like, if you were, say, an aging horror movie actress who'd come to Singapore, in the late 60s and seen the city change like that, how would you feel? You'd feel kind of really destabilized and maybe a little bit hollow. So this is Marina Bay a couple of years ago, and this is it sort of now. So you can see the contrast of how much they've kind of built up, and obviously the Marina Bay Sands, like the big sort of casino. So it is very much about how the city develops as well. I was going to read you a bit. Do we have enough time, though? Yeah. So I'm going to read you. I don't know. Okay, yeah. I'll read you a little bit from the Cersei section. So basically, Cersei is working. She's a grown-up, and she's narrating from the year 2020. So that's in the near future. And she's basically Sue's school friend. So she's like the school friend of the daughter of the horror movie actress. Do you follow? Okay, so. I work as a social media consultant. I've been at my company for over 4 years. When I joined in 2016, I was 29 and happily married and very excited to be here. Now I'm almost 33 and happily unmarried, and on some Monday mornings, sitting in this very room, I feel like if I was stuck on a ship out at sea with these people, I would kill everybody. I should find a new job, but I just don't have the energy. The main account I'm handling is Jolene Sees. She's a Channel 8 starlet who is trying to break into the Taiwanese pop market. First stop Taiwan, next stop China, and then the world. I'll be impressed if she makes it out of Southeast Asia. Her management team are awful, but they pay us on time. I end up doing a lot of work for them, curating Jolene's English language social media content, every post, every tweet, every mailer. Jolene is 17, dewy-eyed and live and dumb as bricks, but she's a nice kid. Make it cute, her team instruct me. I'll action that, I say to them. For at least half my working week, this is what I do, paid ventriloquism. I adopt the voice of a cute, kooky, highly relatable 17-year-old. My office is open plan. Everyone can see my monitor. The sun is coming in strong through the floor-length windows. There must be a word, some German or Inuit term, that describes the stuck, dreadful feeling of disliking a beautiful view just because it is overfamiliar and synonymous with work and daily boredom. I've lived on this island all my life, and I often forget it's just a speck on a map of the world. So much is crammed into the city. No such thing as a quiet, empty space around here, unless you count a corporate car park on Sundays. I crick my neck left and then right, and take in the crystal ship glint of Marina Bay, skyscrapers of silver and mirrored blue glass, the swoop of a highway, construction cranes lifting container crates. Reclaimed land, all this. 30 years ago, it was part of the seabed. Now it's a tall, jagged skyline, hiding a giant sinkhole. By our long windows is a sage green feature wall, so called because it's meant to be the special feature of our recently refurbished office. Yeah, so basically describing the city, quite literally. So yeah, that's like when the Marina Bay was being constructed. And finally, tying up the kind of idea of the city and the construction of the city and the evolution of it, along with cinema. Here are some kind of theaters. So this is like a really old cinema in Singapore in the 50s. This is a Cathay Cinema in 1955, which basically, it was once the tallest building in Singapore. And after Singapore fell to the Japanese in 1942, the building became home to the Japanese propaganda department, which I think is quite interesting and apt because it's where you screen ideas and things like that. So this is the Cathay in the early 2000s. Basically, you can just see the contrast and how different they look. And I was going to read a third section, but I think for the interest of time, I'd rather that we went into like more of a conversation. And finally, yeah, this is a song, which is like a sad song, but I think that we'll skip over it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for broadening our horizon for those in Hong Kong, because these are things that we've never heard about what has been happening in Singapore. And thank you for bringing all these together in a new age of globalization, where you are now, I think, a perfect cultural model, right? Without the age of globalization, right?
Yeah.
I would find it very hard to introduce such a rare but fascinating topic, ghosts and mythology in the Southeast Asia, back in the world, into the world, crossing the border into the world of the English language. Right? But you are certainly on some quite dangerous waters while playing with the dark version of feminism. May I ask you, apart from a crowd of boy fans, whether you have encountered any criticism from social science scholars who might have accused you of twisting around the motherly or the feminine image in the form of such a horrifying ghost? Not yet?
No, I haven't, but I have been, the question has been raised quite often. Basically, the men in this book are very, very marginal, so it kind of centers around three, arguably four, very kind of flawed characters who happen to be women, and it completely passes the Bechdel test being if two women can have a conversation that doesn't involve a man or revolve around a man in any way. So I think 80% of the conversations pass the Bechdel test. So I have been asked several times, why did you write such a woman-centric novel? And I always return to the fact that there are literally millions of novels full of men, and I haven't heard anyone being asked, why do you just write this novel full of men where the women are so marginal? Well, I'm sorry, it was just a book that I felt like writing. So I think there are enough books out there, for men, about masculinity, and there are not enough books to me about Asian femininity, and I'm very interested in subverting the idea of the Asian female as all docile and kind of demure and stuff. I mean, that's not true. The women in my book, they fart, they shit, they curse, they're really, really flawed. They drink, they swear, it's kind of more multidimensional. Yeah.
I wish people would make things more simple, right? In an age of endless arguments and debates over trivial things, perhaps. Right? What you could tell them is that this is just a female version of a vampire, as against the world dominated by characters like Christopher Lee and perhaps others as well, right? It's just a check and balance in the world of ghosts. Why not?
I mean, I think that's the really, really wonderful thing about popular culture, in that you can have so many iterations and creative interpretations of these mythologies and stories that have passed down through many generations. So you have different iterations of the vampire myths, or you have different iterations of old fairy tales or fables, and it's very, very interesting and fascinating to see it transplanted in different cultural contexts. So I guess the thing with Southeast Asian superstition, which we were talking about briefly earlier, is that there is a culture where people do kind of believe and subscribe in these things, and there is an implicit understanding that this other sort of dimension could exist. And I think that different to kind of say Western culture, where skeptics would rationalize that instantly, I think in a context like Southeast Asia, it's kind of understood to be part of the fabric of reality. Yeah, so.
Considering your age, where has that sense of nostalgia come from? It's very rare because now the internet young generation know nothing about the past. They're not interested in anything like the Cathay cinema in 1955. If someone talks about that in Hong Kong, he'll be accused with all kind of prejudices of ageism. Have you heard a lot of stories from your parents or grandparents as a kid in Singapore before the age of 12 when you moved to the UK? Yeah. Yes. England.
I mean, I think that nostalgia taken in its literal form to mean a kind of longing for home or a kind of hearkening back to a different time is basically a very human impulse. So everybody feels nostalgic. So you could have a 12-year-old that feels nostalgic about being 6, simply because their current reality is not the same. Honestly, you have people that are nostalgic for MSN, Messenger, and stuff like that. And every single generation also, you have people that say, our generation is the end of culture. There's no good books, there are no good films, the novel is dead. I don't think that's true.
No,
yeah.
Because yours offered a new perspective as well as a new direction in the light of globalization.
I hope so.
It's
yeah.
more than well, I mean, this strong in the West has been dominated by the religion of Christianity, right? We've been seeing films from The Exorcist, Omen, right?
Yeah.
Things like that, right? Ghosts could only be haunted by priests or missionaries, whereas these ghosts exist in a totally different dimension of spiritual existence beyond that world of Christianity.
Right.
Right.
I have to add the disclaimer that there are no actual ghosts in this book. So they know no actual ghosts or Pontianaks. Like, they're just made up, really. But you have to read it to find out. People get haunted, though.
Yes.
So we were wondering, actually, like, if anyone had any questions. Yeah. So should we? Yeah.
Hi, Sharlene.
Hi.
It's wonderful, thank you very much. It is nostalgic for me because I grew up in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And a Malay neighbor moved in and told us to chop the banana tree down. And we didn't know why.
Was it
And
a big one?
Big
Oh,
bush.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she
get rid of
said
that.
the Pontianak lives there.
Yeah.
And then we didn't know what a Pontianak was. And she
Really?
said it's, perempuan mati beranak, which is
Oh.
Pontianak. And we got, oh, really? And then she told us, you must take the clothes in at night. You
Yes,
cannot
that's
leave
true,
it hanging
yeah.
out there
Yeah.
because the Pontianak will smell your clothes.
She
and
loves your laundry.
Exactly.
I left that out, sorry. She loves laundry.
Oh my
Really
God!
does, yeah.
So it's like, being a Chinese family, we it was a whole new thing. So thank you very much. It's very interesting. My question to you is about, you did a law degree in Warwick University. What
Yeah.
made you want to make this big switch, or maybe it's not a big switch, maybe it's natural, to creative writing? And are you enjoying it now? Would you go back to the law? And would you then become a film director? Because you seem to be very influenced by films.
I love film. But I feel like asking a writer if they want to write a screenplay even is the same as asking a baker if they're going to make a filet mignon. Like, even though you're working with food, it's completely different formats. And I really appreciate film because I can appreciate it purely as like a kind of viewer. I don't have that kind of level of aesthetic critical appreciation or interrogation that I do when I read a book. Because when I read a book, sometimes I'm just like, I get really jealous. I'm like, oh, this is so good. What am I even doing? Or I'm just kind of analyzing it for the nuts and bolts. So I think I have a pure appreciation for things like film and music. But with regards to law, I actually always wanted to be a writer, but I just wanted to do a degree that I felt equipped me with the critical faculties to think independently, to be patient and read like reams of the most boring text imaginable, to kind of like construct arguments and basically sound like an adult. So like I was always going to be a writer. I always wrote. So like it's my complete dream. Everything's like amazing. I would never be a lawyer ever, ever, ever. Thank you. But you reminded me of, I had some fun facts in here, which I forgot to drop in, about some other kind of monsters. Do you want to hear? They're really good. Okay. So there's basically another kind of monster, which is called a toyo, which is basically like it's like a little imp that like I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, it's a fetus, and it's a little child spirit that basically just messes stuff up. So it steals people's stuff, and if you want to distract it, you just leave out toys. Then it'll be like, ooh, and go and play. And then there's another one, which is a penanggalan, which is a flying head with disembodied stomach sac. So it basically just like, flies around and scares people. It's quite good, right? And my favorite is the hantu raya, which takes on the appearance of the owner and does your work for you. So it's basically like you just clone yourself, and this person goes to the office for you or whatever, or like kind of tidies your house and just looks just like you. I think that's amazing. And there's also the polong, which is a bottle imp in a little bottle, and you feed it with blood from your index finger. I don't know what that does. I think it's just nasty. So yeah, sorry, we had some more questions. Sorry.
Well, I'm from the Philippines, so just adding to the whole imagery of monsters, Malay monsters and myths. In the Philippines, we also have not Pontianak, but Tianak. So instead of a mother who died in childbirth, is actually a child.
Yeah,
who's
Is it spelled Tianak?
Yeah, Tianak.
Yeah.
So just remove the point.
What does it look like?
It's basically, it takes the form of a baby, and then it cries in the woods, and if you hear it and you pick it up, it eats you up. It's like a vampire. So it's just like to lure you, so it's like sounding like a
Does
crying
it have,
baby.
what is the baby wearing?
Normally it's swaddled in like normal like baby
baby.
baby clothes and whatnot.
That's
But
a
anyway,
terrible myth,
isn't
because
it?
if you
Yeah.
had a real baby, then you'd be like, oh no.
but there are a lot of intersects with the Philippines being also a Malay country.
Yeah.
And we had actually, just before 1958, in 1953, the CIA in fact joined up with the Philippine Army in using female vampires to scare the people from going out. So they were able
Seriously?
to suppress the communist movement by actually preventing civilians from going
That's
out. So they actually
amazing.
used
What year was
female
that? What year was-
53, 52, 53.
You need to write a book about that.
Well, it's they've already written books about it, but it's
Really?
really funny that in that period. But anyway, and I also wanted to add, when you mentioned Ring, I don't know if you're familiar with the American movie Teeth, 2007.
Oh yeah, I love that. That is
it's also subversive.
monstrous feminine
Yeah.
to the max. If anyone hasn't seen it, you should. It's a lot of chipolatas.
Yeah. But anyway, the question that I'd like to posit to you,
Yeah.
it's basically about the process of writing.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
it seems from what you can see in the internet, you've given some interviews where you'd already been interested in writing about Pontianak from way before. However, midway, I think you had a reference to the Barbarian
Sound Studio, yeah.
and that you changed your mind in shifting from having a monster perspective to having the three women later on. So the Guardian article didn't actually expound so much why you made that shift. That's my first question. Perhaps elaborate on that. And second one, because you mentioned World Cup, and it's also that fixation on the idea of predestined failure. I think you mentioned that in the article. I was just wondering, in the World Cup, they actually had that Croatian player who failed his penalty kick, and then in the second time he actually made it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, in the process of writing the book, you
I love
actually
this
had so
question.
many people looking at the process. Your book was a book long in the making, even. And then didn't you at any point become worried that it would somehow not meet the expectations? And in the end, you made the penalty kick the second time.
I did,
But it was like a bit like that. So maybe you could describe also the process of how you overcame so much expectations, being
Okay.
a promising writer and actually coming up with a book. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. So the first one, how I watched Barbarian Sound Studio. Initially, I'd written 25,000 words told from the point of view of a Pontianak. I went on and on to my friends about it. I was like, this novel is amazing. She crawls into the internet. She gets a haircut. She like shits on graves, and then she like goes into the internet and then like crawls through all these lines of code. And I really love describing it, but it was just an awful book. It was just basically like a writer trying to sound really clever. I was like, look at me describing the internet. It was awful. And then the Pontianak just ends up like hitting a wall, and then she wakes up in the room of a small child, and then I was just like, I don't know where to take her. I'm done. So then I watched Barbarian Sound Studio, and I was very, very inspired by that whole kind of, the Jello aesthetic and like filmmaking. And then I thought of, the kind of idea of these three very, very complicated characters who intersect and kind of confront each other in quite subtle ways. So that's kind of how I made that shift. And in response to your second question, I was really under a lot of pressure because I won the award for the first 25,000 words, and I hadn't written the rest of the book. But I worked with my agent. I sent her segments, and she was very encouraging. She wasn't too critical, but she would give me kind of bigger picture suggestions, like, I don't understand where it's going here, whatever. So we worked on it gradually. But the thing about predestined failure really interests me. Frankly, I'm terrified all the time, and I think that I write from a place of helplessness, where I just feel like I'm just like running away from like a fire. And I think that's the only way I can write. If I was smug, I think I would just write terrible stuff. So just like being terrified. I'm terrified all the time. So like even I've written one, but my second one, I have no idea whether I'll ever finish it. I will, but just saying. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Teo. The British cover of your book reminds me of another British book I read. It's called The Essex Serpent, also by a young British...
Oh, yeah, Sarah Perry.
Yeah, Sarah Perry. And the movie clips remind me of a 1980s Hong Kong movie called A Chinese Ghost Story, costumed by Leslie Cheung and Joey Wong. So thank you for making this horror in a hilarious perspective.
Is that the one with the like vampires that are hopping?
And it's I don't know. It's called 倩女幽魂 in Chinese. So there, the myth and mysteries and the local monsters are widely used and well received in different cultures and different movies. So I would like to know, how do you think about these similarities and the differences? And because you were born in Singapore, and raised in the UK. So are there any other myths or monsters in different cultures played a vital role in your literature creation? Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I think I'm very, very interested and motivated by fear, like what horrifies us. So why do people pay money to watch horror movies? Why do people pay money to get on a roller coaster and like scream your lungs out and feel like you're going to die? Well, I think that it all ties into our internal death drive and our fear of death and our fear of mortality. So it's kind of confronting that, but within a kind of very safe praxis. So I think like I'm very fascinated by what is uncanny and what is creepy. Like, I think that it's very easy to scare someone. All you need to do, if you got on a train, right, and someone sat down opposite you and you hadn't met them before, they just looked at you for like a minute without blinking, would you be scared? Yes, I think so. So, I mean, it's very easy to scare people. And I think like being scared is on the continuum of being destabilized, and it's so much more interesting in fiction to be destabilized than to just like follow these kind of neat plot points toward like a happy ending or a resolution. I think some people have said maybe that like this book perhaps ends on quite a quiet note, but I quite like that because I think that, you know, life is like that. It's kind of messy and ambiguous. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharlene.
Hey.
I would like to ask a question about the imagined readership when you're writing this book, because I understand that you're born in Singapore and then you work out of the UK and you write in English, and I've seen that your book have been translated into many languages and have reached a really wide readership around the world. When you were writing it, were you imagining a readership that were not familiar with the background of the cultural sort of references and the myths of Singapore, or were you sort of also understanding that your works will be read by, you know, people who are familiar with it, and how did you sort of figure out how to put the references in? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, basically, my imagined readership is people that read and are interested and engaged in the same themes and the same kinds of like works of fiction that I like. So like my imagined reader is like someone that likes the same kinds of books as me. That's basically it. And it kind of cuts across cultural contexts. I think for this particular book, because it's narrated a lot of the time by a 16-year-old growing up in Singapore, I did imagine my reader as being quite a twee, sort of like sweet kind of Singaporean teenager some of the time, just to kind of really engage in that. And I feel that every time that I changed the narrative perspective, it felt like getting in and out of a swimming pool. Like you kind of have to get in and you get used to the water and then wade around for a bit. And then that's how you kind of change voices. So I don't really think of a particular readership in mind. And I think that I never ever want to write a depiction of my home country in a way that's touristic or condescending, either to people from Singapore, out of Singapore. There's nothing I hate more than reading those books where they have those italicized things and they're like, you know, like there'll be like a xiao long bao, you know, like a dumpling, you know, brackets, and that kind of makes me sick. So I think that you should trust the reader's intelligence, that they understand and they'll figure it out. And if they don't get it, they can look it up. That's the internet. Yeah, thank you. Do we have time for more? We're giving away, also Macmillan is giving away my book, baby. So if you like one, you can ask a question. Yeah.
Nancy, you want to ask a question? Yes.
Hi, Sharlene. Thank you very much for the very interesting sharing. I have two questions for you. As someone who's very much influenced by films, I just wonder, when you are writing your book, do you already have a vision of how your characters look like? There's the first question. And the second question is, what's next for you? After Ponti, what is the direction that you will be continuing for your next book? Do you already have an idea?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't really imagine my characters like concretely, because I think like that's almost like casting them, and I don't really write like it to be a film, but I do kind of write quite cinematically in that I do think one of the most frustrating things to me about writing is it's really hard sometimes to get your characters from point A to point B, and I just get very caught up in that. I'm like, why do they have to move? Like, they're almost like these Sims. You have to make them move across a room, and it's really tiring to describe that. So I do kind of try and imagine their physicality, but I don't really give them a specific face. Not really. Your second question was what I'm working on now. So I can't talk about it too much. I'm about a quarter of the way through, but it involves interviews, a lot of interviews with people, certain Tsao people, and just basically fictionalizing their accounts. And it's a book that's very much driven by anger, and a difficult book, and I don't think anyone will like it. I think actually everyone will hate it. Thank you, that's it. That's all I can say. Yeah, it's a disaster.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, because I asked the question because when I come, I see the title, Malay Myth. Then I thought maybe you will talk about Malaysian movie. And I realized that after I see your presentation, I finally realized that you are talking about Singapore movies. So I just wonder what is the relation between Malaysia movie and Singapore movie on this common topic?
Oh, well, because the myths originate out of Malaysia, so like that's why it's the Malay myths, but the film clips that I've shown were made in Singapore. But obviously there are a lot of co-productions, like, you know, like Malaysian kind of crew and Singaporean, you know, they kind of mix. So that's because it's such proximate countries, so there's a real kind of creative partnership a lot of the time. Yeah, and yeah, the myths do originate from Malaysia originally rather than Singapore itself, so that's why I said Malay myths. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Lady there.
Yes, and I want to ask a question is that because you love films, so there is also a lot of people love the horror film, so they try to direct it. And why would you like to write fiction instead of direct a film? Because I also know that Malaysia's film directors call James Wong. Do you know him?
Janice Wong?
Yes, and he directs a lot of famous film, horror film, and he's so successful. So why would you like to write the fiction but not to direct a film? Yes.
I don't know, that's like saying to someone who's like swimming, like, why don't you be a pole vaulter, you know? It's two completely different. I kind of get your meaning in that there's that kind of impulse that is very kind of filmically led, but I think that one of the most interesting things about a novel is that it basically is like a summation of your fascination. So you can be fascinated by different elements of things, like real life, or like other aspects of culture, or historical moment, or even just something that angers you. And a book is basically a narrative argument, like strung together with characters, of kind of presenting this viewpoint, just saying like, this is what I'm interested in right now. So that's why it's a novel, and that's why I love novels. Yeah.
How did British publishers respond to the script?
The manuscript?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, not to like, yeah, we submitted it, and within like less than 24 hours, we got our first offer. So that was the best week of my life. So that we got like 7 offers, and it's all gone downhill from there. But that week was amazing. Like they were like, "Oh, we love this book," and they had like PowerPoints which were like better than this PowerPoint, and being like, "This book is great. Like we love you," and I'm like, "Oh, thank you," and like giving me food and stuff. It was brilliant. It has really all gone downhill from there. That was like the honeymoon period. Now it's just having a book out is like being like a bald egg, like a peeled egg. Oh God. Sometimes like I just like someone tags me on the internet and they're like, "Oh, this book, I didn't like it." I'm like, "Don't tag me, don't tell me. God, I don't want to know." Jeez. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, they've been good, and my British and American publishers were actually surprisingly understanding when I said I don't want to explain too much. I don't want to put in a glossary. I don't want to like insert things that I don't feel would serve the narrative, you know, for the sake of being kind of like, you know, cultural explanation or anything. I think like the publishing landscape has changed a little bit. The worrying thing is whether this is a moment or whether it's a real progression, because in the UK, you know, like, you know, BA, ME writers make up a real small minority, so we'll see whether it changes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we know why you didn't make a film, but what would you do if somebody wanted to make a film of your book?
Well, we were in discussions about that actually, but I think it's a very lengthy process that involves a lot of stops and starts. So it actually is something that is being developed, but more along the lines of a limited TV series. Yeah.
And do you kind of happy about that idea of it being made?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm fine with whatever. I feel like once I finished it, it's out of my hands, and something that I'm making peace with is that I have no control over whatever happens, and it's just the life of a book is a very long one, and I think that the internet tricks you into thinking that it's all short term. People talk about it and then it goes away, but I mean, I'll probably find my book selling for 1p in a bin some point soon, but then that might give someone a chance to read it, and I just want people to read it. It's like a virus. I want people to get infected with the virus. Good. It'll take a long time. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. It'd be cool if it was a film. Yeah.
Any more questions from the floor? That gentleman, please.
Sharlene, thanks a lot for your presentation. It's really, really helpful to make us really want to read the book. Actually, I have read the chapter 1 of the book. I really like to go into it. It's from Owen.
We're going to give you one.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm not really be able to discuss with you about any on the literature or this thing. I'd just be interested to know one thing about authors. How would you really strike the balance between, say, I can see that your passion in writing and enjoying and really like to share with people what you wrote, what you've written, and this sort of thing as an author, as a writer. But at the same time, you have to face your living. So when you are doing this sort of kind of job, how you strike the balance between the two?
As in writing and doing the public kind of stuff.
Your living by writing. Is there any?
I think what people don't realize is that all a book is a bunch of sentences that are strung together, and every single little contribution really helps. So I use a writing program called Scrivener, which is different to Microsoft Word, where basically you can write in little chunks and folders, and it's searchable. So that's how I write. That's how I write the first draft of a novel. I write it in fragments, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 30 minutes, whatever. So whatever you can fit in. And I think that when you're working on a novel, you think about it all the time. So you're kind of writing all the time. I take down notes on my phone or whatever. Yeah. So it's just small steps. Yeah.
Have you deliberately adopted such a language style, brevity, precision, short sentences?
Yeah, I think short sentences are better.
With no vocabulary.
No, I mean, if there was no vocabulary, it wouldn't be a sentence.
I know, but
just be a bunch of full stops.
No difficult vocabulary.
I don't know. I think language is all about balance. I think there's so many wonderful words out there, but I'm personally not a fan of flowery language. I'm just kind of whatever, say it simply. You know what I mean? Get to the point. I don't believe in really long books, personally. It's my preference. Yeah.